The top fear for Aussie first home buyers isn't the wrong house, but the wrong mindset. Investing huge sums based on flawed thinking, leading to mortgage stress and stagnant property value. Today, Yen breaks down the 5 main options for Australian first-time buyers. First, maximize government grants. In Victoria, buyers pay no stamp duty under $600,000, with discounts up to $750,000. New homes even get a $10,000 subsidy. These benefits are significant, especially the new Help to Buy scheme. Under government co-ownership, buying a new home means the state covers 40% of the price. For existing homes, it's 30%. The minimum down payment is just 2%, down from the usual 5%. You're also exempt from lender's mortgage insurance, saving you over $10,000. Income caps are $100,000 for individuals and $160,000 for couples. On the surface, this policy looks really appealing. It helps you get into the market with virtually no barriers. Because the government is a co-owner, you don't have much pressure from a large mortgage, but in reality, there are significant issues. This policy encourages you to take on extremely high leverage. Your net equity is only 5% or even just 2%, which means that if housing prices drop by just 2 or 5%, your equity is wiped out. From a balance sheet perspective, you have no equity, no net assets left. But what you do have is a pile of debt owed to the bank. An even bigger problem is that Help to Buy often steers you toward the ultra low-priced market, and there's a pattern with low-priced homes. They're either far away or they're apartments. If they're far away, you won't be happy living there. If they're apartments, then you really should be prepared to owe the bank money. I think introducing this policy is extremely irresponsible on the part of the government, because if young people don't choose their first home wisely, they could end up technically bankrupt. I've seen quite a few clients drawn in by this policy, thinking, with just a 5% down payment and the government covering most of the rest, what more could I ask for? But only after hearing what I had to say did they realize just how big the risks are. If your budget is extremely limited and you need to balance both the value of living and the requirement that the property doesn't depreciate, then the technical difficulty of choosing a home becomes way too high. I don't believe any first-time home buyer with no experience can pull this off. The second option is to use a moderate budget to buy a townhouse. Generally, this means your family helps out with a few $100,000 in loans, and together you can reach over $1 million to buy a new or nearly new townhouse or unit. In my view, there's not much difference between the two. I also really don't recommend this option. Let's do the math. Suppose it's a $1 million townhouse. The down payment plus various fees will easily exceed $250,000. You basically won't be able to enjoy any government benefits because the price is above the exemption threshold. And a townhouse is a strata title, so your annual property management fees are usually between $3,000 and $8,000. All the maintenance costs for common areas and so on have to be shared. But that's not even the main issue. The land for townhouses and units is pitifully small, at most only 200 or 300 square meters, so there's no potential for further development. We all know that land is scarce in Australia, and long-term appreciation relies on the land itself. No matter how beautiful or new the building is, it gets older and deteriorates every year. From a financial perspective, the building depreciates by about 2.5% annually. For the same price, if you buy a house after 10 years, its increase in value will usually far outpace that of a townhouse. With a townhouse, there's no outdoor space, so your living experience is also somewhat compromised. So if you choose a townhouse or a unit for your first home, it's really neither here nor there. What about appreciation? Well, it's not much different from putting your money in the bank. And the living experience? Well, it's just so-so. With the same budget, in my opinion, you might as well split it into 2 parts. Use one part to buy a cheap small apartment to meet your own living needs, and use the other part to invest in a large old house in the outer suburbs. That way, you're taking a 2-pronged approach, separating your needs for self-occupation and investment. The third option is to buy an old house to live in yourself. Old houses are relatively cheap, and the land value makes up a high proportion. When we help clients choose investment properties, we always pick those where the land value accounts for more than 80%. Because it's the land that appreciates, old houses have great potential for value growth, often doubling in 7 to 8 years. But after all, it's still an old house, so the key is to choose one with a solid foundation. What does it mean to have a solid foundation? Many people mistakenly think that the floor plan or the orientation are the most important factors. Actually, that's not the case. Of course, these things matter and have been talked about endlessly, so I won't repeat them. But the most important thing is whether the land is big enough. Is the frontage at least 15 meters? Is the driveway 3 meters wide? What about the slope, easement, overlay, the setback from neighboring houses, and so on? There's another point that many people overlook. If the plot is large enough, you can add a granny flat later on. In Melbourne, a compliant granny flat costs $150,000 to $200,000. Once built, weekly rent is $350 to $700. If we build it, the cost drops to $110,000 AUD with an annual return over 15%. Not to mention real estate. Even US stocks sometimes can't compare, right? So, what's the problem with this plan? Living in an old house often compromises your quality of life. Is there a way to have the best of both worlds? Yes, Plan 4 is rent vesting. Instead of buying a home to live in, you buy an investment property and continue renting. It combines renting where you live with investing where it pays. Invest for returns, but rent for lifestyle. Separate these decisions to avoid compromise. Buy a $500K investment in a high-growth area. Rent hits $450 weekly. Meanwhile, a one-point house in a Chinese community rents for just $550. You lose $100 weekly in cash flow or $200 annually. If your investment grows 10%, that's $50K, while the 1.5 meter rental continues to depreciate. This is the classic case of comparing rental yield with capital appreciation arbitrage. Many people also tell Yen that they feel insecure not living in their own home. But to be honest, even if you own your own home and have an 80% mortgage, 80% of that house actually belongs to the bank. What you have is just the right to use it, not the net asset. Psychologically, there's a difference between renting and living in your own home, but financially, there's not much difference. Chinese neighborhoods differ from 15 years ago when any purchase gained value. Now, buying in these areas offers appreciation similar to a bank deposit if you choose well. Poor choices like Box Hill can stay stagnant or even drop. You can't live comfortably at home while expecting it to outperform the market. Stop dreaming. That's why rent vesting is more budget friendly. You aren't tied down by living needs and can reside in areas you couldn't afford to buy in. Investment rent offsets the rent you pay for your own residence, making cash flow manageable. This suits those who have specific living requirements but can't afford to buy there, or those wanting to build assets quickly before upgrading. But you do have to accept the fact that you are renting someone else's place while collecting rent from your own tenant. This is the rent to buy arbitrage logic. The fifth option, which is also the worst, is buying an apartment. I've criticized apartments enough, but remember, if it's your first, buy entry level and cheap. They're easy to rent and live in, but they don't appreciate and might even lose value. Plus, special levies can cost $10,000 instantly. So who should actually buy one? If your budget is really limited, you can't afford any other type of property, and you still want to live somewhere convenient. So as long as you do your due diligence, you can go ahead and buy an apartment. Save up the rest of your money quickly to leave room for buying an investment property in the future. An apartment can be your first step, but it's just a springboard, it's not the end goal. How do you choose among the 5 options? Which one should you pick? It depends on your current budget, your goals, and how you prioritize between living and investing. Leave a comment below and tell me about your situation, and I'll let you know which option suits you better. I'm Jin Kan Xian, your home buying advisor here in Melbourne.